Hey everyone, I want to talk a little bit about why contamination OCD felt so hard to deal with. What are the specific challenges that came with dealing with that theme, based off of what the fears are and what the compulsions are around it. And I think each theme has kind of like its own unique challenges that it comes with in terms of how the fear plays out. So I want to take a look at that in the context of contamination OCD, specifically because I think it really physically limits your life into like a what I like to call like a 1 by 1 square meter kind of thing, because it it spreads around everywhere and it makes you feel like there's only this one little corner of your life where you have some kind of safety, right? And where there's no contamination, where you can remain completely free of any trigger or any worry. And that essentially is when you cut out the rest of the world. Even living within a house within a house where there are other people living as well, even within the house it is a little corner as well, because you're not comfortable roaming around everywhere in your household, because there are certain corners that feel triggering or where you feel like the contamination is. So physically it limits your ability to move around a lot, right? And then the other part that really feels really difficult is that the fear or the triggers are very dependent on other people's movements as well. So you can control your movement in terms of what you touch, what you don't touch, where you sit, where you don't sit, but what you cannot control is what other people are doing, where they're going, what are their whereabouts, what things they touch, things they don't touch. And that feels incredibly challenging to think about, because you feel compelled to map out their movements, where they went and where they didn't go. And you spend, at least I spent, a lot of hours just trying to predict and trying to guess what the other person would have done or not done. So then I could then predict where the contamination has spread or not spread, right? Or even if it was me as well, I was also trying to predict and guess my movements based off of like an upcoming situation. But when there are other people involved, you feel very out of control, you feel very helpless, and you don't know what to do about it, because obviously like you cannot be in charge of what other people do or they don't do. And then you don't also trust them either, because there's so much mistrust that develops with other people, especially if they know that you are this anxious person or you have developed a certain fear around touching surfaces and whatnot. So then you also develop a huge mistrust of whether they're telling the truth or not, or whether they are missing out on some important detail. So we feel compelled to then interrogate them on what they've done, what they haven't done, where they've been, what they've touched, who they interacted with, who they shook hands with, what place did they go to, what kind of objects or liquids did they interact with, things like that, right? Did they clean themselves enough or not? Did they clean themselves the proper way or not? Did they clean themselves according to how you want, like you feel comfortable or not? So there's a lot of interrogation that goes on that front, because you don't trust the other person, you don't trust their judgment, you don't trust their movements, and you also don't trust whether they're telling the full truth or not. So that really can cause a lot of friction with other people. It can cause a lot of like at times a lot of drama, honestly, with other people as well, because it just makes them feel like some kind of fugitive, because you're interrogating them and you're trying to monitor their behaviors and whatnot, and it never goes down well when you do that, whether it's in a real life setting or whether it's like in an OCD setting. So either way, it doesn't feel great either. So, and also then you your because your physical movements change so much that other people also notice it, and that's another difficult thing to go through, because other people are noticing you behaving in an off way, you touching something and you having this like distress on your face, you holding something but holding it like, I don't know, if you're holding something, you're trying to hold it with like the tip of your fingers because you think it might be contaminated, right? If you're holding something, you're holding it with like, I don't know, with your sleeve like this, because it's like, and then it becomes like just this thing of like, what's going on here? Because clearly this is not um, this isn't normal behavior, and our movements become so frozen as well. I mean, it's not like we are wearing oversized clothes and it's naturally like this and therefore we are holding things with like this. We like it's a very like specific robotic kind of movement that people see. It's not natural movement. It's very like curated, it's very mechanical, it's robotic, it's cold, and it feels very off, right? So therefore people notice that, and you find, and it's very difficult to deal with a situation like that where you know other people are watching you and finding you doing awkward behaviors, but sometimes they don't even say something, but a lot of times people do say something as well. They notice it, they comment on it, and they ask us like, what's going on, like what's this? And then you also don't know what justification to come up with, so trying to come up with some kind of explanation. If they know you're going through OCD, let's say a family member or a loved one, then it like it becomes also an easy escape, and just like, oh, I'm just having like OCD things, and then nobody really questions it. And because we also don't allow questions either at times, because it's just like, oh, this is just it, and I don't want you to like ask me a lot of questions. I was like that because I didn't want it to become like a topic of discussion. It was very uncomfortable even trying to explain the things I was afraid of, right? And so it becomes difficult to hide your anxiety as well. I felt like with, like, for example, relationship OCD, if I was having some kind of discomfort or trigger or fear come up with like a friendship or whatever during a conversation with them, or in a romantic setting, if there was like distress that came up, I could mask it through the conversation. I could still somehow mask it and carry on and whatnot. With contamination OCD, I felt like I could mask it because it was very obvious how I was moving, touching, and like placing, interacting with my environment physically. So I couldn't mask it because it wasn't just like anxiety. I had to behaviorally play it out because I had to do like in the moment. It felt like I really had to do those compulsions. I really had to avoid certain things. I had to hold my glasses with like this or something like that, because it just I could not take the risk. No matter what, I couldn't take the risk of. And even if I did take the risk of, at times I felt embarrassed, right? So in front of other people, I would hold things. But then after I would hold things, I would also um, go do like a quick washing ritual. Or if I didn't have the opportunity to, let's say, wash my hands or something like that, then if I had touched my glasses and I had put them somewhere, then my hand would just remain like this, because I wouldn't contaminate the rest of my hand by doing this or touching something else. So then my hand would constantly be like this, right? Having a conversation, my hand would be placed like this on a table, right? Because this was contaminated. I didn't want it to spread to the rest of my hand, because then it would make it even more difficult. So little things like that, body movements, while it became very noticeable, it becomes difficult to hide, and you feel very embarrassed, you feel very ashamed, you feel very naked because it's right there in front of everyone, in a way. And you feel transparent, and it just kind of like in that moment at times when you know that other people are looking at you, it just sucks out your like complete sense of self. It just makes you feel like this empty shell at times. Like it's a very it feels like a very degrading experience as well. To yourself, at least it feels like a very degrading experience. And yeah, you just lose a sense of self. It feels like you're losing like a sense of self in that moment. Then the other thing, in terms of related to not being able to control other people's movements, there's also like you want to place rules on how other people behave, right? This is where actually what really strains relationships, because there's so many people we speak to who have really bad contamination OCD, who are trying to monitor their children's or their husband or wife's behavior constantly, right? Even something like if your partner is in the mood to have sex, but then you would ask, oh, but did you wash your hands when you just walked out of the bathroom, or did you wear slippers to the bathroom or something like that, right? Did you clean up after yourself properly and things like that? And then that would really kill the mood, obviously, because it's just like it's a very like it's supposed to be like a very spontaneous thing, trying to be intimate and trying to get excited and have fun, but then it just like that ruins that entire moment. It's just one example, right? But if you're placing a lot of strict rules on your loved ones, of course they're not going to like it, and of course they're going to really hate that, and they're going to not want to be around you, and that's especially hard for parents who are trying to do that with their children, because then children learn to kind of like walk on eggshells. They feel like they have to walk on eggshells around you, as a parent, because it's like, oh, mom or dad, whoever, is always anxious about this, and we can't do this, and we can't do that, and that's not, obviously, I mean, like, this is not to make anyone feel bad as a parent if you have contamination OCD. However, you also have to keep in mind how realistically how OCD works, right? And the impact that it can have around your loved ones. But that can also be motivation and like drive, and something that propels you forward to really work on it in a very proactive and consistent way, because you can see how much it is affecting your loved ones. So that can also become that push for you to be like, I don't want this to affect my loved ones, and I really want to hold myself accountable to work on my recovery, so that I not only make life easier for myself, but also for, like, other people around me as well. um, the other thing I really found like difficult about it, and that I feel like really makes contamination OCD sufferers like freak out and like very paranoid, is how quickly the contamination spreads. Because it's like, if my sleeve is contaminated and then it touches my face, and that face touches this pillow, and this pillow then touches this couch, and then it goes on and on and on. So it's this like domino effect of the contamination, and it spreads like in an instant. It literally it spreads like, fire on gasoline, just in very very quickly, and it goes from one thing to the next to the next. And initially, when it starts off, because it's very contained, you are doing your compulsions because you feel like, oh, I mean, it's just this much, I can contain it. But inevitably one day it will spread everywhere. um, and it will spread beyond your control, and that's where you then cannot absolutely go around cleaning every single thing, because it's too daunting, it's too much. There's some things that are also impossible to like sometimes clean as well. And it just like it just spins out of control that way. The other thing is also that I think, and this I wanted to mention with, like, other people noticing things as well, it's also that contamination OCD doesn't always latch to like scientific things like disease and illness or something like COVID and things like that, right? So, I mean, of course, there's that as well, but like, and even then, when we're trying to justify it to people, no, that this can lead to this disease or like that problem or that problem, even then, people obviously do not find us very irrational and erratic on that, because they see that our fear is extremely exaggerated and we are extremely afraid of that. However, if your contamination OCD is something like you having gone through a period of depression, for example, in this hoodie, and then you not wearing this hoodie, and you feeling like this hoodie is contaminated because it builds that association, and then anything that touches this hoodie is dirty to you. That's where then it's so difficult to also then, and that's how my like contamination OCD functioned as well. It was so like difficult to even try to explain it to anyone why I was feeling triggered by, like, I don't know, a pair of glasses, or why I felt like death was upon me if I don't know, touched this coaster. Like, why is it scary, and why do I think that my life is going to fall apart if I touch this coaster, right? Things like that. So it became a very like at times excruciating, and like I said, it felt like a very demeaning, degrading experience to try to explain that to people, because even saying it out loud, you felt like an absolute fool. You knew it was like irrational, you knew it's completely illogical, and still you don't know how to convey the intense real level of fear that it feels, it's like pumping in your body constantly. So that's another aspect that just really I absolutely like hated about it. And the last thing I want to like mention is the effort to recover, because I think with contamination OCD, because the compulsions and everything are also so physical in nature, so the recovery also requires like a lot of physical effort, such as doing exposures. Um, so touching things, going to places, going to things, going to do things out of your way because you know that that's a specific trigger. Like let's say there's I don't know, some shop like 20 minutes away from your house that holds some kind of bad memories, or you think is like the most contaminated place or something like that, or where like original point of the trigger was. Obviously you would do anything to avoid that store, and like, but you also know that that's also the exposure that kind of holds your one of the keys to your recovery as well, to have like a big breakthrough of here. And so you will have to go out of your way physically to go there, and in that store you probably will have to go and touch things that you know will trigger you as well. And it's the same with like whatever is like contaminated for you, your home environment or things like that. You physically have to put yourself in that position to touch things, to hold things, to sit in places, to wear clothes, to interact with people. All those things you'll have to do in order to overcome it. So it's very like, it can feel like it's very physical in nature, and you have to put your physical self through like a lot of triggers and a lot of anxiety to be able to recover. And that I also found really challenging as well, because again with relationship OCD, I felt like it was easier for me to practice sitting with, for instance, not looking for reassurance or not confessing. It felt easier. Like, I mean, in the moment, actually, it felt quite excruciating. But like, if I really had to compare it, I feel like that was easier to do. Or working on my beliefs around relationships, I think felt easier to do as well. With contamination, I think the exposures felt like terribly difficult for me. Like it felt, I don't know, for me, I think the physical effort that went into that and the physical nature of the recovery task and the homework was immense. It was immense. And I mean, sometimes I look back and I'm like, I can't believe I even did that, or I was able to do that. But I mean, I had to bring myself to that position, obviously, because I at some point I was like, I need to get out of this. But yeah, that I think that's another thing that makes it like specifically very difficult to deal with. But then the other option is, then either we work on the difficult parts of recovery, and I'm sorry, my hair has grown long, so it's kind of out of shape, but I have to get a haircut as well. Either it's that, or you then completely limit yourself to like a corner of the house, which for me was my bedroom. And even within my bedroom space, it was just my bed, because it felt like the only safe, clean place that I could comfortably sit in, without any problems. So I really had to just really crawl out of that comfort space as well. Yeah, so those are just some points I want to cover in regards to contamination OCD. I felt like this would be a shorter video, but like with me, it's never a short video. But I hope you found this helpful. I hope you find this relatable. Let me know what you found difficult with your specific theme. Whether there are any other points that you would add to this list as well. And I'll see you on our next video then. Bye.